Capricorn is the 10th sign of the zodiac. It is a cardinal, earth and feminine sign, ruled by Saturn. It is represented by the sea goat, which looks like a mountain goat, but with a fish's tail. This is perhaps the strangest symbol in the zodiac, but it does give a vital clue to your character.
Why is it that the moment I say I'm born under Capricorn, people say, I see, slow, materialistic and melancholy, and that's the end of that conversation. And I don't think I'm any slower or more materialistic than anyone else, and I certainly don't think I'm all that melancholy.
From a textbook description, I doubt whether anyone would choose to be born under the sign of Capricorn, for your ruling planet Saturn is the most tiresome of all. It is the planet of age, and by age I mean maturity rather than senility, of restrictions and limitations, and also of solitude, the sort of loneliness that is a fundamental part of carrying responsibility.
Would you say that we're all born introverts?
Not by any means. Some real ravers have been born under your sign. Elvis Presley, the granddaddy of rock, was born on the 8th of January 1935. But your attitude to life is undoubtedly a serious one. You seem to be forced to take a lot on your shoulders at an early age. But first, let's try to analyze your symbol.
I always look upon the goat as a thrifty animal. It manages to survive on so little.
But it also climbs higher and higher up the mountain, moving cautiously from crag to crag until it eventually reaches the summit.
Symbolically, that's right too. And that's the general impression you give. You appear to be methodical and economical, and absolutely certain of where you are going.
But what about the fish's tail? That's a part of the symbol I've never thought about very much. I don't think I've even heard it discussed.
Well, that's because it indicates the least known aspect of your character, and perhaps the least admirable. The one that takes you down into the depths of emotional despair, or of indulged egotistical and selfish desires, when you can swim in a sea of discontent.
I think it's because we're practical people that we are so at sea where emotions are concerned.
And when you're thwarted or frustrated, you can give the other 11 signs of the zodiac a very rough time.
Rule 1. Don't try to impede a Capricorn. You said we were a cardinal sign. What exactly does that mean?
Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn are all cardinal signs and have certain qualities in common. All of you are in a way leaders, people who set the pace and who have an air of authority. The first degree of your signs correspond with the beginning of each of the 4 seasons: Aries spring, Cancer summer, Libra autumn and Capricorn winter. Spring is the time for sowing, summer of flourishing, autumn of harvesting, and winter of exploiting what has been produced.
And of preparing for the whole cycle to begin again.
The businessman would speak of plowing back some of his profits.
But you are expected to use your cardinal qualities for the benefit of mankind and not just for yourself.
Don't you think our material side is overstressed? Certainly I can economize, but then I usually have to.
On the simple level of the grocery bill, getting value for money is no bad thing. But it is when possessions become an obsession that you can start to go wrong.
Rule 2. Don't expect lavish generosity from a Capricorn.
It may seem presumptuous and even blasphemous to relate Christ to astrology. Whether or not he was born on December 25th is, I think, arguable. In many ways, Christ has more in common with the sign of Pisces, but certain aspects of his life are very Capricornian.
It's never really occurred to me to think of Christ as belonging to any particular sign of the zodiac.
Well, take for instance the story which demonstrates his seriousness at an early age. I mean the account of how he was found discussing his father's business with his elders in the temple when he was only 12 years old. Because he knew he was dealing with the materialistic world, he told many of his parables in terms that ordinary people would understand.
The line "render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's" is certainly a phrase that I can understand every time I fill in my income tax return.
And he was alone on so many important occasions throughout his life, and at these times he seemed to be denied the comfort of either his family or his disciples.
Capricorn and its ruling planet Saturn are both associated with sacrifice. But Christ was also a great doer, and not just a talker. He physically turned over the tables of the moneylenders, and ultimately it is what he did rather than what he said that matters. I'm of the opinion that Saturn also rules the Jewish faith. Throughout history, the Jews have been hounded and persecuted. But with the fortitude of Saturn to sustain them, they have suffered out of all proportion to any other race, not just generation after generation, but century after century, and still have never been deterred from their belief that ultimately they will build a homeland that is both safe and tranquil. Saturn may be the great destroyer, but it is also the greatest builder. These two sides of Saturn illustrate that you cannot appreciate happiness unless you have known sorrow, nor success unless you have known failure. But above all, that ambition is nothing unless it is for other people as well, and if misdirected, is personally unsatisfying and not worthwhile.
I have to admit that we want whatever we do to be rewarding in every sense.
While Capricorn has none of the innate cruelty of Scorpio, your ambition does in fact excel theirs.
That's because we have to prove ourselves to the world.
And we must have a goal.
I think I'm prepared to work harder and longer than most other people to achieve personal recognition. I certainly seem to have to.
And even harder and longer to make a marriage or a relationship work.
There is a certain amount of snobbery in this sign, and social position is important to you.
If by snobbery you mean wanting the very best for my family as well as myself, then I'll agree.
This, of course, can be a marvelous motivating force, just as long as the desires don't become excessive. But the tendency to give importance to the materialistic does affect your choice of friends. They tend to belong to a circle to which you aspire, rather than the one you were born into.
Well, isn't it natural that you alter your friends as you grow older?
As there are 12 signs of the zodiac, so there are 12 houses of the horoscope, each one representing a stage in human development. Now yours, being the 10th, corresponds with the 10th house. And in the map of the heavens, this is extremely important because it is the mid-heaven. It represents one's integrity, honor, reputation, and standing in the world. When astrologers interpret a birth chart, they look to the 10th house and the planets occupying or making aspects to it to assess the heights to which an individual can rise. Consciously or unconsciously, Capricorns are all striving for a position in the world, and the weakness of this very strong sign can be an excessive need for fame, honor, or admiration. True enduring fulfillment only comes to you in proportion to your moral and spiritual growth. Some of the great leaders in all walks of life are to be found under this birth sign, from Richard Nixon, the President of the United States, to Muhammad Ali, better known as Cassius Clay, one of the world's greatest boxers.
Nixon certainly didn't get to the White House very easily, and one has to admire the man for the way he went on after his defeat in the 1962 California primary to win the presidential election.
Muhammad Ali, during certain phases of his life, seemed to display all the worst characteristics of Capricornian egomania. Look at the way he announced to the press just at what stage of the fight he would win each contest.
Rule 3. Never think you have heard the end of a Capricorn. There is a law in astrology, which is that if you really want to grasp the essence of any sign, examine its opposite. Each sign seems to contain the least attractive qualities of the sign opposing it. Now yours is Cancer, and you can be even more moody, more oversensitive, and heedless of criticism than the most self-pitying Cancerian.
And I must admit there are times when I can even outmatch them when it comes to justifying my emotions.
An interesting point to consider is that as Cancer is said to represent the mother principle, because it is ruled by the moon, the most important feminine force, it follows, therefore, that the opposing sign must represent the father principle. And it seems that all of you, both male and female, have a strong urge and ability to play the father figure in other people's lives. Others turn to you for advice or help, not so much about their emotional problems, but rather about their practical difficulties. At best, you can give considered, rational, and objective answers. Being the opposite to Cancer, you have to be realistic.
But surely this doesn't mean that we are devoid of feeling.
No, but Cancer is a very good example of what is deficient in you.
And as it works both ways, I suppose this means we could teach Cancerians a thing or two.
And I'm sure you will.
Rule 4. Don't underestimate the force of Capricorn's emotions. Now, Can we get back to this grey, depressing image that everyone seems to have of us?
Well, firstly, all the earth signs are exactly as their name implies, earthy.
What do you mean by earthy?
Well, the sort of words I would use to explain what I mean are solid, reliable, common sense, someone with their feet firmly on the ground.
Oh dear, we sound so utterly boring.
But as I said, Capricorn is also a cardinal sign, and is therefore neither passive nor inactive. Now let's look at some of the fascinating people born under Capricorn. In the arts, there are painters like Cézanne, perhaps the greatest post-impressionist, and Matisse, certainly one of the greatest painters of the 20th century.
That's interesting, because they both painted in what was a completely new style.
But Murillo was more typically Capricornian, because even when he painted the Holy Family, he depicted them as ordinary, down-to-earth peasants.
And there are also writers. Rudyard Kipling, Sir Compton Mackenzie, and Henry Miller were all born under Capricorn. And if you want an example of a writer with a really pessimistic view of life, there's Anton Chekhov, the great Russian playwright. In the theatre, there are not only numerous actors and actresses born under Capricorn, but also Stanislavski, who brought an entirely new approach to the interpretation of drama when he initiated the method school of acting.
I find that fascinating, because I don't think of us as initiators. We tend to develop what someone else has started.
I did say that yours was a cardinal sign. The general belief in astrology is that Capricorns have a relatively tough time of it during the first 30-odd years of their life, which might account for what is thought of as your undue seriousness. Invariably, family responsibilities are shouldered by you at an early age. And also, as soon as you start work or advanced study, you do so with a dedication way ahead of your years. But, and I think this is the biggest but of all, whatever you miss out on in youth, you recoup in later years. People like Marlene Dietrich and Cary Grant are two marvelous examples who, if they achieved stardom before, became superstars after they were 40.
Rule 5, never think that you can write off a Capricorn.
I once read something of yours that said if we ruled the world, human sacrifice would still be the order of the day.
I was in fact quoting astrological tradition. Be that as it may, Capricorns, when putting their plans into practice, especially if these plans are political, will demand total obedience and are without mercy for those who challenge them. Although there are others alive today, Mao Zedong is perhaps sufficient to illustrate the point.
But what about Capricorns at their best?
Joan of Arc must have been a Capricorn.
I know she was. And more recently, Martin Luther King, Clement Attlee, and Albert Schweitzer all demonstrate the devotion and persistence of Capricorn at its best. But one of the most outstanding examples of the strength, stability, and achievement gained at what most people would think of as retirement age is the late and much respected Chancellor of Germany, Konrad Adenauer. Nothing could throw him. Conservative in the wider sense of the word, you do tend to be traditionalists.
Well, I see no point in changing anything unless you have something more worthwhile to replace it.
And there is a certain security in the things one knows.
Well, what about the people who don't conform to your ideas? For instance, let's hear what you think of the other signs of the zodiac. How about Arians?
Arians have the most wonderful energy and go. At the same time, I think they tend to rush into things without always considering the implications.
Taurians?
Now, I get on with Taurians. We seem to speak the same sort of language. But there are times when they expect too much from other people. I know it may sound odd for a Capricorn to say this, but they seem to overvalue their possessions.
Geminians?
They have wonderfully agile minds, and they're quick to grasp a point. At the same time, they don't look very deeply into anything. Would it be unfair to say that they lack staying power?
Cancerians?
I know they're my opposition sign, but I find that I get on well with Cancerians, Cancerian women at least. If anything, they are even more responsible in their approach to the home and family than I am myself. On the other hand, they're very passive, aren't they?
Leos?
I respect Leos. They have such an air of certainty and authority about them, but they're somewhat extravagant, both in their emotions and their spending.
Virgoans?
Here again, I find them relatively easy to get on with. Whatever they take on, they do really thoroughly. They would never let you down, but they do seem to be lacking in ambition.
Librans?
I know they're often dismissed as vacillating and shallow, but I must say I've never met a Libran I didn't like. They seem to have the ability to be pleasant to everyone.
Scorpios?
Well, they do tend to go a bit far, don't they? But you have to admire them for it. They seem to have such nerve.
Sagittarians?
Colourful characters, aren't they? They can be very entertaining, too. If only they'd come down to earth some of the time.
And Aquarians?
Very one-track minded, I'd say, but I'm secretly rather impressed by their genuine disregard for convention. Frankly, I don't find them very comfortable to be with.
Pisceans?
This is the one sign that I can't seem to come to grips with. Well, you just can't hold a sensible conversation with a Piscean. They seem to live in a fantasy world.
Well, at least none of your criticism is destructive, and you do seem to take a very balanced view of people. And now I'll tell you what I think about you. People often misinterpret your determination to do things at your own pace as a lack of intelligence.
So, Rule 5. Never underrate a Capricorn.
Now, let's talk about the movements of the major planets in 1971 and the effect that they are likely to have on your life. There are 12 houses in a horoscope. Each one represents a stage in human development and also an area of human life. The first house represents the ego and how you show yourself to the world. This doesn't necessarily mean the whole you, but only as much as you need to show in daily life, and therefore your personality and the way you look. The second house indicates your own money, how you earn or acquire it. The third represents communication in both senses of the word. How you get on with those who are close to you, which includes relatives, and you and day-to-day or short journeys. The fourth symbolizes your home, and the fifth all the things that should be a source of pleasure, like your love life, children, and your creative abilities. The sixth house represents health and work. The seventh indicates marriage and any form of established emotional relationship. Astrologers also believe that this house shows the nature of your open enemies, people you have to battle with. The eighth is associated with death, financial arrangements with other people, and possibly your basic sexuality. The ninth indicates religion, long journeys, and the higher mind. The 10th, as you know, is your status in the world, and also in your profession. The 11th is your friends, and the 12th house is almost impossible to define, but it includes anything that is secret, and also restrictions and limitations. This can mean anything from frustration to hospitalization and imprisonment. It also represents your unknown enemies. So, the placing of the planets in these houses at any given time gives a clear indication to the astrologer of what areas of your life are going to be of significance. For instance, a beneficial planet will favor the affairs of the house concerned, and likewise, a supposedly difficult planet will place some sort of strain wherever it is positioned. So first, let's find out where your own ruling planet, Saturn, will be in 1971, and the areas of your life which will be affected by it. Saturn has been in Taurus, your 5th house, for the past 2 years now, and as it is considered restricting, it should have brought you a few heartaches and worrying moments as far as your love life is concerned, or problems with children. To go back to your love life, even if you are married, it's possible that the normally reliable and faithful Capricorn could have been tempted to kick over the traces. But fortunately, or unfortunately, with Saturn in Taurus, you couldn't possibly have got away with it. The 5th house is your house of pleasure, so it's fairly safe to say that life can't have been very much fun recently. Saturn remains in Taurus until the 19th of June, so to begin with, don't expect any radical changes until after that date. The problems may not be any more serious than an inability to express your affection, or as severe as some serious impediment to marriage. This all depends on other planetary influences in your birth chart. Those of you who will continue to have these problems during the first half of 1971 are most likely to be those born in the last 10 days of Capricorn. Because, as I have said, Saturn is your ruling planet, you are accustomed to delays and to having to bide your time, and therefore no one is more practiced at making the best possible use of its influence.
I suppose that's why I haven't been thrown into utter confusion when for some reason or other my relationships with other people have gone wrong. Perhaps it's because I know that they'll work out in the end.
You mentioned problems relating to children. Can I say something here? As a parent, I know that I have to persevere to find a solution when there are difficult questions to settle involving the children. But are we really as hidebound, out of date and out of touch with the younger generation as people seem to think?
Yours is, after all, the sign of the father, and as such you only want what is the best for your offspring. If this means new methods of education or teaching, it's only after serious consideration of all the pros and cons that you will change your approach. When Saturn moves into Gemini, your 6th house, on June 19th...
That's our house of work, isn't it?
Yes. Then the emphasis will shift onto your career and your health. Firstly, work, which means what you do to earn your living. Again, it would be difficult to find anyone more dedicated to their job or who takes their responsibilities more seriously than you. This is one of the benefits of having Saturn as your ruling planet. Therefore, the added strain of having Saturn in your house of work will be less severe for you. It's quite likely that the weight of new responsibilities and the reluctance of those who work with or for you to share them will test your physical reserve as well as your patience. As Saturn takes 2.5 years to pass through any sign, its effect will only begin to be felt during the latter part of 1971, and then only by those who are born in the first 10 days of Capricorn to any appreciable degree.
It all sounds terribly depressing. Are we destined to go through life always beset by problems?
It's only because you are born under Capricorn that I have talked about the influence of your ruling planet first. And remember, besides pointing out that it is the great undoer, I have also described it as the great builder. Of course, you're not destined to go through life beset by problems, but the job of an astrologer is to state the possible causes of discord or difficulty and when they are likely to happen, as well as the nice things. Then it's up to you to act or react accordingly. As a matter of fact, I prefer to talk about the nice bits, but then I wouldn't be doing my job properly. Also, the fact that you're informed of the true situation should help you to face your problems as and when they arise, instead of just pretending they are not happening.
I'd much rather be told the blunt truth, because then I can prepare myself in advance, and it also helps me to be objective when I'm tempted to panic. Anyway, work is never really a problem to me, just as long as I can be sure that it's not wasted effort. In fact, I thrive on hard work, even with housework. Give me the scrubbing instead of the dusting any time.
So all you need to know is that the pressure of work will be greater in 1971 than it has ever been. But there is also this question of health, yours, or perhaps the health of those who work with or for you. This is obviously a time to become more conscious of your own health and to avoid overstrain.
I know there are times when I should leave more to other people. But when the work's there, I just have to get on with it. I can't relax until it's completed.
With Saturn in Gemini, you will have to become more flexible. To injure your health for the sake of success would be madness. Now, let's talk about the other planets. First, Uranus. This is the most revolutionary planet, and it has been in the sign of Libra since early 1969.
Libra is our 10th house, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Uranus is always an unpredictable planet, and particularly so in the 10th house. It can mean that your prestige will rise to unprecedented heights, but when it is badly aspected, it can put you very much out of favor with the people who matter to you professionally rather than personally. Sudden changes in your position or your career may catch you unawares, but at best it can give you a sort of flair and flamboyance that isn't usually associated with your character. Combine originality with your natural practicality, and you could surprise us all.
It all sounds a bit dangerous to me. Is my reputation at stake?
With Uranus in your 10th house, you're not going to have time to waste worrying about your reputation.
Yes, I must say I'm becoming less and less concerned with what people think about me, but I thought that was just age.
It isn't. That's the effect of Uranus. There will be two very different planets, Neptune and Jupiter, in your 12th house during 1971.
The 12th house? That covers a multitude of sins, doesn't it?
Well, I suppose that's one way of putting it. Now, people tend to think that Capricorns were given short measure where feelings and intuition are concerned. This is not true. But you neither reveal them freely nor flaunt them, perhaps because they are so precious to you. Neptune is a planet that is not exactly compatible with Capricorn. It is mysterious, nebulous, vague, and is associated with the unmaterialistic. In spite of yourself, you'll find that you're becoming less concerned with essentials, and you may even experience a yearning to cast off the cares of this world. That sounds slightly obscure, but Neptune in the 12th house heightens the desire or necessity for secrecy, and stimulates an interest in the spiritual rather than the practical. This is a very personal area of your life, and consequently you'll feel unable to discuss it with anyone else. Perhaps that's as it should be. Even if you find that your thinking is becoming less orderly and logical, this can't be bad if in compensation you become more sensitive, responsive, and sympathetic. And now to Jupiter.
Is that in our 12th house as well?
Yes, unfortunately it is. But it's not as bad as it sounds. For although you'll be aware that many of your hopes are being frustrated, Jupiter should endow you with sufficient optimism to see that sooner or later they will be realized. The marvelous thing about astrology is that the planets are not static, which means that questions are answered, problems are solved, and situations do change as the planets move on.
It doesn't sound as though we're the easiest people in the world to get on with. What other signs are we most likely to succeed with?
Tradition has it that you should stick to your own element. In other words, you are more likely to be able to build up a friendly relationship with someone born under the other two earth signs, Taurus and Virgo. But I personally believe that although the common denominator is right, such an alliance doesn't make for much excitement. Strangely enough, many Capricorns do make a very successful partnership with Cancer, their opposition sign, because this is a union of a mother and father principle. Though there'll be times when you're pulling in opposite directions, you do understand and respect the other cardinal signs, Aries and Libra, and likewise, they will appreciate your independence and determination. Now for the rest. You might be able to work for, but never with, a Geminian. Although you might find Leos physically attractive, it would be a very costly alliance, in more senses than one. Scorpio makes sense as your house of friends, for you'll appreciate each other's strengths, but you'll have to make allowances for each other's weaknesses too. Now let's consider Sagittarius, your house of secrets and restrictions. Provided you are willing to be the stabilizing factor, this could be a shattering relationship.
But who would be shattered first?
Remember that the 12th house is also the house of your own undoing. And, like it or not, Sagittarians will be coming into your life in 1971. If anyone can cope with an Aquarian, it is a Capricorn, and vice versa, because while you respect their originality, they respect your resilience. And lastly, Pisces. This is another case of them being all the things that you are not.
You tell us that as Capricorns we're somewhat materialistic, so let me ask about money.
I'm glad you brought up the subject first, because I wasn't looking forward to being the bearer of bad news.
Oh, I wish you hadn't asked. Is it really that awful?
Well, the two eclipses of the moon fall in the signs of Leo and Aquarius, both your houses of money. The first in February and the second in August. Full moons always mean separations, difficulties, or partings of some sort. So it looks as if you're going to be parted from some of that hard-earned cash. It is the partnership money that really needs watching. But your innate caution should give you some protection here. The best advice I can give you is to be meticulous with all your present commitments and not to take on any more if you can possibly help it.
Being a housewife, What I'd like to know about is my home life in 1971.
Well, there are no major planetary aspects which adversely affect your home, other than an opposition from Uranus. This you have lived with for the past couple of years, and it really means no more than some conflict between home and your own or your partner's career. If you are prepared to be optimistic, you might accept this as exciting rather than disturbing.
Why, I wonder, is it so important for us to succeed? I know I can't bear the thought of failure.
The last 4 signs of the zodiac, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces, are concerned with the final and finer stages of human evolution. And if you are born under any of these signs, you are born to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You are, in turn, the visionary, the builder, the changer, and the unmaterialistic man. You can't fail because you can't opt out of your responsibilities.
To know my responsibilities can help, but what I wonder is this. If I am born under Capricorn, is it impossible for me to change?
I really see no reason why you should want to. For, like those born under any other sign, you have your virtues and your disadvantages. No, you can't really change. But what you can do is endeavor to bring out your best qualities and conquer your primitive and therefore your worst traits. Thus, within the terms of Capricorn, development rather than change is possible. So, Capricorn, after Scorpio, the most maligned sign of the zodiac, in your quest and need for success, you do forfeit of your own choice many of the more subtle pleasures of life. But, as I've said, your sign sits squarely in the mid-heaven of the zodiac, and is therefore the sign of prestige, of responsibility, but above all else, of integrity. You may at times make work and success your gods, but a life without aims, duty, or work is, in the final analysis, unproductive. There is one last thought that as Capricorns you might consider, and it's this. Man suffers most from what he fears. He dreads the most what never appears. Thus does he often bear far more than God for him did hold in store.